Hi everybody, Jim Bucknell here to talk about the Festool Domino. This is a tool that's been described sometimes as a biscuit jointer on steroids. It's a very handy machine. I've found that it's really changed the way I look at woodworking in a lot of ways. Some of you have seen the infinity cubes that I make. These are 1 inch by 1 inch square, and I frankly don't know another way to build them without the Festool Domino. It's really a slick machine for a lot of different things besides just building these. They come with a series of bits. They're a twist bit, and they are come in a variety of sizes from 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 millimeter. That is one thing to know, that the machines are set up with millimeter scales, which takes a little adjustment. I still think of myself as 6'2", not 187 something or other centimeters. That's even the right number. But anyway, very easy to install and change bits. You click a lever on top right here, and it unlatches the machine, so it pops out. Then it has an arbor lock right here, and these bits just screw onto a threaded shaft. They won't come loose, so there's no worry about slipping out of a collet or anything like that. They just thread on like so, just to snug them up with the included wrench. And then it just slides back into the steel guide posts. And it clicks into place like so, and you're back in business. So what it is essentially like a plunge router, basically. The bit extends out, and there are depth settings over here, depth settings here on the side to limit the plunge depth, and then we'll talk about other fence adjustments and so on in a second. The way it cuts is it spins and it wobbles, and so it cuts slots. And so I'll show you here. You can see the bit protrudes, and then when you turn it on, you'll see that it wobbles, and from the bottom you can see the mechanism work as well. And what that does then is cut mortise slots, and then you put the dominoes are the floating tenons that you put in. So this is a piece I put together to show you the different sizes, from 4 by 18 long, 5 by 28, 6 by 38, 8 by 38, 8 by 48, and 10 by 48. You can also get, these are beech wood, you can also get walnut for exterior work. It cuts very tight slots. It also does have an adjustment, which is on the top of the machine, which you can adjust once it's running to add an additional width to your slot, so you have some ability to move your pieces. And I've shown, if you look at this is 1 slot bigger and 2 marks bigger than the normal slot, so it gives you that flexibility of being able to slide things. You can easily do edge-to-edge joining with it like this, where it fits just really smooth. And then I wanted to show a comparison to traditional biscuit jointers, where the narrowest board you can put up with a 0 is 2 1/8, with a 10 slice biscuit 2 3/8, and then with a 20, 2 1/2. Whereas with the Domino, you can go down very narrow, and that really is great for face frames and drawers and so on. You can just use them for just about everything. Most of the time when I've used my machine and come back into the house and my wife says, "How did it go?" I say, "I feel like I'm cheating, but I'm okay with that." And she says, "You used the Domino." I go, "Yep, that's what I did." It really is an amazing machine. So we've seen the bit installed. This is the largest one. It has the adjustable tilt down fence, so you can adjust for various degrees. It's got detents to stop it at various locations. So 45 degrees, for example, locks in like that. It also, you can raise and lower the fence as well, so it drops up and down like that. And there's a depth gauge over here. There's also built-in stops for the depth. So if you have standard depths, you can easily adjust that. And then there's different depths of cut for the different length dominoes, and that's adjusted here with this stop. So it's a really easy to use machine. It takes a little getting used to. One thing to know, it does need to be run with a vacuum attachment at all times, otherwise it loads up on chips and can damage the machine. So a vacuum hose can plug on here. Like all the Festools, it's got a lock-in plug, which is really handy, so it doesn't come unplugged when you're in the midst of a project. One of the things that I like, when I built these infinity cubes, again, they're 1 inch by 1 inch, and ordinarily you would need to do a layout mark on every one of them. You'd have to find a center line and mark it, which is just a lot of time and also a lot of opportunity for something slipping, getting it wrong, and so on. With this, you do it on one of them, and then I install this base. And this base it squeezes in on your workpiece, so your piece just fits in and will keep centered every time. Very easy to put on the machine. I gotta turn this down. It just slides on like so. These two tabs click in and tighten. And so that's installed now. And so when you're going to cut these pieces, for example, for the infinity cube, you line this up with your first one. I tilt the fence up to 45, and I'll adjust the height to show you this later. But after you've laid the first one out, every piece goes in like that, and you just cut it, turn it to the next one, flip it over, make the cut on the next one, and away you go. And it's as simple as that. No more layout time and alignment time and so on, and it just comes out really well. So it's a very slick and easy tool to use. There's another attachment that's handy, which is it expands the base so that if you're standing it on edge to do shelving and that kind of stuff where you're cutting into a flat face, it's really easy to get accurately and stable. This one comes off. This one is just a base support that screws onto the base of the machine like so. And this tilts up, and now you've got a nice broad base support, so when you're plunging into a surface, you have a really good stable base, so it doesn't want to rock around and jump around as it plunges in, and that really helps stabilize things. So it's a really remarkable machine. Then the other thing is, if you're doing edge joining on a long piece, for example, and you're going to put a number of dominoes in along the way, they have these outriggers that you can adjust these pin locations, and so you can cut a slot and then put this in the slot, and it automatically references over to the next one, and you cut that one, you slide it over, put it in the slot again, and do it again, and you can get equal spacing all the way down as long as you want to go in either direction. So those are also a pretty slick deal, and again, it eliminates so much time measuring, marking, and laying out that it's really a handy feature. So I think that's it for the overview, and George is going to do some demonstration cuts, and then I'll be back in a little bit as well.
Hello, George Knutson here. Picking up where Jim left off. I'm gonna demo or show you a combination of some different ways you can use the domino, different types of joints that you can put together, different ways of using the tool. Jim mentioned that the bottom face of the tool is a reference point, as is this vertical face. The vertical face can be tilted to any angle up to 90 degrees. For edge joining, which is probably one of the most common things that we use a domino for, we just mark out the location, just like you do with a biscuit joiner. And we can either reference off of a given flat surface. This is a torsion box, so I know it is good and dead and flat. If you're going to do this on a workbench that you think is suspect, might have some roly-poly to it, do it on your table saw. That's another good safe place to work. You know that's going to be good and flat. So if we use the tool this way and have it referenced on the surface and keep the same bottom edge of these boards down and run those joints, then the domino will line up. Another way we can do them is reference off the top of the board, in which case now we're resting on the top of this board, and we need to also register on the top of the other board. In this particular case, it really isn't any benefit to referencing one way or the other. A little later on, I'll show you a couple cases where it very definitely makes a big difference. So why don't I just run these real quick? I'll do one joint referencing off the bench, and I'll do the other joint referencing off of the drop-down fence, and you'll see the tiny difference there is to it. So what I'm referencing here is I've made my marks for locating on the boards. On the face of the tool right here, there are etchings. And so it's very easy to see the lines there. So that's what I'm lining up with my pencil marks. There also is a bit of a notch down in the bottom on here that I can also use that too. But I'm lining up down on this side, lining up the pencil line with my marking on the base of the plate. So those are the two mating mortises. You notice they're not exactly centered, but they are referenced off of the same edge. They're the same height up from the bottom. With edge gluing, we're really using the domino primarily as a reference to get our surfaces flush. They add some incremental strength, but really on an edge glue, a long grain edge joint, the strength of that joint is in the glue surface on the two faces. So we don't have to be dead center on this to be structurally strong. So a domino in there. Locks those surfaces flush. Okay, so that was referencing off of the workbench. Let's do the other end, referencing off the top of the board. And again, I've already done this, but I raised the level of the top plate up so that the bit is gonna be roughly in the center of the board. So now I've got a little different reference point to look at here. I can focus on the little clear plexiglass guide on the top here, so I can line this mark up with the mark on my board. And it's actually important to notice that the tool is resting on the surface of the board. The base of the tool is not actually on the surface here. It looks like it's really close, but you see that it drops down. You have to be very sure that you don't have set this so that the tool is resting on here, on the bench, and the top is flying over the top. So let's go ahead and line this one up and run it. You see those are actually a little bit closer to center line on this one now that we just did. But they don't have to be the same. As the two that Matt made up do have to be at the same. There's a nice tight glue joint. Other things you can put together. I mean, these are 1/2 inch thick. Call it a picture frame, could be door trim, but they're very thin. But the domino will safely and very securely hold those together. The trick you have to do when you get into thin stuff like this is the fact that the bit can only go down so far. It's fixed in the case. And as it turns out, you see the bit doesn't even remotely come close to being in the center. Not sure if you can see that or not. But I need to get the bit down farther. So all I have to do to accomplish that is use a shim underneath the workpiece. That raises the workpiece up So that now, I'm not sure if the camera will catch this, but now if you can see the bit, now pretty much lines up with the middle of that board. Okay, so there's a workaround to that as well. Another common situation is using a domino for building cabinet case parts. All the cabinets in here are built that way, where there's dominoes at all of the intersecting corners. So we're domino there, that sort of thing, and obviously there would be another one across the bottom. Okay, you see that? So how do we do matching mortises? So this joint is going to go, gotta read my marking, okay. That's the way that joint is going to go together. In order to get this position in the right place, if I just hold that securely and just fold that piece down, then I need a mortise in there, and I need a mortise in there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, this material is the exact same thickness, so I'll put that on there as a spacer to make sure I'm exactly the thickness of the material away. Okay, so now I need to put a mortise in this face and in that face. So this is set up to where, again, I'm going to use my cursor on the front side here to line up with my mark on that guy.
Line up the mark on the back side now.
Now you can see where you've got your mortises. Now you should be able to put a domino in there, a domino in there. There we go. So there comes your box frame. Something else we can do, very similar concept, but for those of you doing trim work, more often than not, if this is a door opening, you're fitting a piece at a time, and things are in my projects. It seems like every house I've had to do any remodeling on, things are not flat and smooth here. There's the sheetrock is got a lump in it. The paper is balled up on the edge. Some surface is not flush, and you have a hard time getting the surfaces of the trim to be lined up. So one way to deal with that is glue up. I mean, do your fitting like you normally would, but instead of attaching it a stick at a time to the doorway, attach the frame together ahead of time, and then you can take that whole frame to the opening, and everything is nice and tight and flush here. We're back. So this is a project I've been doing a number of these little outdoor benches. I've got a little nature trail out in the back of my property that I'm putting little benches out there along the trail, and using logs that come off the property. So this is a bench in progress. This leg is already attached, so you kind of see where we're going. But this will use the same process as I just showed you for like a cabinet box. It's the same scenario. We've located, here's where we're gonna go. I position the leg where I want it to be, and I put a pencil mark this time now. So I've got a location down here. I put a pencil mark where it's gonna go. I drop the piece carefully down. Then I clamp a caul against the back of it. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm gonna be plunging the domino into the bottom of this to make the mortises that are gonna then join with the other ones. So just like with the cabinet, I'll go in this way, and then I'll turn on the same marks, plunge the matching mortises the other way. The added twist to this one is these are such thick pieces, and they're gonna be sitting on uneven, soft ground out in the woods. I wanted them to have more stability. So I wanna have a couple more dominoes spaced out to the other side from that. So the way you can do that is provide yourself another reference point for the domino. This is essentially the same thing as where we put the masonite shim underneath the thin material. This moves the domino up. So now I can plunge. I'm gonna go ahead and do this, all right? And again, I'm lining up, I don't know if you can see through from there, but I'm lining up the cursor on the inside here with my mark. So now we can see we've got 4 mortises down at the bottom edge. And by the way, with these, I'll usually, since they're going to be sitting outside, I'm using epoxy when I put these together. Show you. I didn't use the tight slot for these dominoes. I used the second step up, so that gives me about a 1/4 of an inch more length, about 1/8 of an inch on each side. That gives me, this being as big as it is and as many joints as there are to try and put together, it gives me a little bit easier adjustment there. So I try to get them in as close to center as I can to start with. So, here's the drum roll. There you go. Six mortise and tenon joints all together. So there you have it.
Yay!
Okay, so during the break, I actually sprinkled some water on that little bench that I just put together, and it grew, lo and behold. This is kind of a big brother to that piece. This is actually a piece that I'm in the process with. My wife wanted a table out by the fire pit for the kids to get their sticky s'mores on and all that kind of stuff. And this is some slab wood I had around. So this is going to go together the same way as the bench did. Same process of joining with dominoes. This is a wider surface, so there's going to be more expansion, contraction. So I will only actually glue the dominoes towards the center of the slab. The other dominoes will be just there to prevent racking and twisting. But I'll have double rows of dominoes at the top of both legs. And same thing for the stretchers going in here. I think I'm going to do a Seth Rowland twist. Our friend from over in Port Townsend has done a number of pieces similar to this, where he also includes a rock that sets in a carved recess in the stretchers. So I'm kind of in search of the right rock at this point for that one. But it turns out my wife actually when I got to this point, my wife kind of decided she didn't think out by the fire pit was where she wanted to have this. She wanted it in the house. So it's actually going to live in the family room, and then when we do barbecues, it'll get taken out. So, but again, very simple, straightforward, loose tenon joinery, and the domino makes it easy. Logan, a couple other different styles of benches. These two are using mitered joints and have dominoes reinforcing them inside. You can see a very different look here. The smooth surface is on the outside on this one, and the smooth surface is on the inside on this one. That means we have a different situation in terms of reference point for the domino in order to do these joints. So I'll show you how I go about these. Earlier in the track saw VST, you saw where I used the track saw to make the 45-degree miter cuts on this particular stool. So let me show you now how that works with the domino. The one trick, since we already did the cutting with the track saw, I won't talk about that so much, but for lining up for the domino, this is a 45-degree angle, and we want the domino to be perpendicular at 90 degrees to that face. So in essence, we just need the domino to sit like that. Flat face on the flat face of the joint, and when we plunge, it'll punch a domino or a mortise at 90 degrees into that joint. But we need to hook on to the top here to get a good reference point. And from the track saw VST, you remember I said hold on to that cutoff piece when you make the 45-degree cut, because what I want to do with that is I put double stick tape on that, and I line that up right at the very top of this cut, and this tape has gotten enough dust on it since the last time. Okay. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but now I actually have a 90-degree angle here of solid wood. Okay, so now I can drop the alignment fence down. Here's my 90-degree angle. All right, 90 degrees here. That matches right up with that 90-degree surface that I've created there. So by putting marks in my two locations where I want to put these dominoes, I can now line up from the top, and I can plunge in and do those two cuts. This extra piece on the backside just gives me a lot more stability for the domino to lock into place and stay at 90 degrees directly to the face of the joint. And the result, and you do the exact same thing with this piece. This goes up and goes into the vise, just like that one was. Stick on the cutoff piece on the backside again, so you've got a full 90 degrees there to lock on. And that's how you do that joint. I added a little twist to this one too, just because I do difficult. I just can't seem to do it the easy way. I just like the look of it having a little bit of a splay coming out. I mean, it's sort of an organic looking piece anyway, so why not give it something that looks a little more like nature. But we're going about the same way. The angle here now is not 90 degrees, it's actually 100 degrees. So the miters on here are not 45 degrees, they're 50 degrees. That's the only difference. Put this up here. Set the fence to 50 degrees. See that now? Now I'm locked in. I'm registering on the smooth inside face here, since that curved outside doesn't give me anything to register on. This angle is my 50-degree angle that I made the cut at. I raised the upper fence so that my domino goes in fairly close up here to the edge, so that the domino doesn't go through on the backside, and also it just gives me a stronger joint in at that fold point. But my marks are there again. I can line up through the opening. I can see where my mark is, not from here, but from where you are. And punch those three in the same way, do them on the other side. And you get a stool.
Cool.
Okay, I don't have actual chair parts, these are just mocked up parts, but this is another situation that the domino deals very well with. Picture this as the back leg of a chair that you want to attach an arm to. You don't want to, I prefer not to use screws going through there. It's not very strong, not very pretty. But if I can just establish a spacer that puts the arm wherever it is that I want it to go, and if it's going to be at an angle, I can go ahead and cut that. I can do that too. I can just by aligning it. So let's say I do put a compound angle. Put an angle on there. Okay, and I just clamp it. Okay, so now I've got a slight angle upward. I can decide where it's going to go on here, make a pencil mark on both pieces, and now this is my reference point. This surface and that surface are exactly the same place, so they're a common reference. So now I can take this piece, line it up with my mark, and punch a mortise there. Okay, so now I've got the mortise in here. Register the domino on the same reference point and plunge that one in. Then I've got room for a domino, and generally speaking, arms are going to be a little thicker material, so I would generally put in a double domino. So I would do the same things we did on the bench, where you put a little shim in here so that it just raises this platform up. So I could put a double domino stacked vertically, do them this way. Okay. Okay, you're looking at a photo of an Adirondack style chair. King Dahl brought this over about a week ago. He was looking at different methods of joinery to use for it. And the domino just made complete sense for this kind of a project. As it sits right there, it has the dominoes in. They're all dry. Nothing has been glued up yet, but this kind of shows you with the dominoes you can get the good snug fit and things will stay in place. And you can check, you can validate and confirm all the places that need to be real flush are flush and lined up. Here's another shot showing the back angle of the chair. Something you don't really see very well in those pictures is the fact that those back legs, the long legs back here, actually are a compound angle. They angle down towards the back, and then they also close up. They pinch together at the very, very back end. They come in, it's not very much, but it's just 5 degrees, but it really adds a nice effect to the chair and comfort to it. Okay, so now stepping away from the picture, here's a portion of the actual chair, and now you can see that compound angle on these legs. They kick in 5 degrees, each of them, and you have the angle front to back cut that's already on there as well. So there's a lot of joinery that needs to happen here to keep this, and especially being a chair, solid and secure. So there you can see what we've got going on there. We've got 2 mortises, and they're spaced out at the outer limits of this board. And you'll notice there's a gap just about the same width as 2 dominoes, because there are 2 dominoes that connect this front leg to that stretcher. So you're getting as much strength out of as much of the tenon as we can without running into each other. So in order to do this joint with the compound angle, this edge is flush. And that gives us, again, that common reference point that we want to have for doing the dominoes. So the inside face is what we're going to use to register the tool. So for this joint, we're going to use the flip down fence on the domino to register against our common reference surfaces. In this case, since one of our reference surfaces is just a very narrow piece, it's a little difficult to keep the tool perfectly aligned square on there. So this is a great opportunity to use this auxiliary fence that Jim showed you earlier. It attaches by 2 knobs on the bottom onto the base plate, and it extends this surface. So you've got a much wider registration point there. makes it a lot easier to keep the tool from tipping, so you don't get an angled mortise where you want it to be a dead-on square 90. So again, we're using the cursor for the center line on the tool, lining up with our pencil marks for the center line on the workpiece, square it up, keep it tight, and plunge those two mortises in. Just that simple. Now again, the inside face is my reference here, and it's a little hard to see that it's not 90, but it isn't. Sorry. This is kicked in 5 degrees, so this is actually an 85-degree angle. And this is my reference face, because this is the side that comes out flush. So I use the drop-down fence again, so I can rest on, and here's where, remember I mentioned again, make sure the tool isn't sitting on the bench. We need to make sure that's up high enough. Actually, I just want to make sure that the tool is hanging out over the back. So I changed the angle for this drop-down fence to 85 degrees. 5 degrees off of 90, right? So that lifts it up just a slight bit. And now when I reference on that top face, when I push the domino in against it, it'll give me a reference against that solid, that angled face. Plunge my 2 holes there, and that gives me mortises again that are at 90 degrees to the face, even though the face is at 85 degrees. Right? I don't know what the final count is on the number of dominoes in this chair, but it's getting up there. But it's going to be rock solid. So, okay, so kind of recapping, we've used the domino in a lot of different ways, a lot of different types of joints. Used a lot of different reference points. You know, now that's the kind of the key with domino, is finding that common reference point for a joint. We're not saying the domino is the end-all be-all and the only tool to use for chair building or bench building, but it's one to look into and consider. If you have a project coming up that looks like the domino might have application, give Jim or myself a call. We can talk it through, see if it fits, maybe make some test cuts and see what you think. And otherwise, I think it's, I've got to spend some time with glue up here now that I've got all these parts all cut and dominoes fitted. But we will see you again next time for another topic.